Hello students and welcome back. Today we shall continue with the discussion on a certain topic from object-oriented database system, and that is type, hierarchy and inheritance. Okay, let us see what is type, hierarchy and inheritance. The simplified model for inheritance. This is a simplified model, and the object model for inheritance will be discussed later on. So let us see what is inheritance and what is type, hierarchy. Another main characteristics of object database is that they allow type, hierarchies and inheritance. Both attributes and operations can be inherited. When we talk about inheritance, we mean there should be a parent and an offspring, right? So here we shall see what is a parent and what is an offspring. Inheritance allows the definition of new types based on other predefined types, leading to a type hierarchy. A type is defined by assigning it a type name. Alright, every type will have a type name and then defining a number of attributes or instant variables and operation or methods for the type. Alright, in other words, we can say that a type must comprise of attributes and operations. Alright, in the simplified model, the attributes and operations are together called functions. When we say functions, we mean the attributes, the combination of attributes and operations, since attributes resemble functions with zero arguments. A function name can be used to refer to the value of an attribute or to refer to the resulting value of an operation. We use the term function to refer to both attributes and operations, since they are treated similarly in a basic introduction to inheritance. A type in its simplest form has a type name and a list of visible functions. Sorry for the disturbance. Alright, let us continue. When specifying a type, we use the following format, which does not specify arguments or functions, to simplify the discussions. Here, alright, this is the format of specifying a type. We have a type name, and a type will have functions. Let us say we have a type person, and it can be defined as follows. Person will have name, address, birth date, age, and SSN or the standard number. See there. In a person type, the name, address, SSN, and birth date functions can be implemented as stored attributes or variables, whereas the age function can be implemented as an operation. Why do we call an operation? Why do we define the age as an operation? That is because age can be derivable from the value of the birth date and the current date. I hope you understand. Okay. The concept of subtype is useful when the designer or user must create a new type that is similar but not identical to an already defined type. The subtype then inherits all the functions of the predefined type, which is referred to as the supertype. Remember I said about the parent and the offspring? Here the parent type is known as the supertype, and the subtype here can be called as the offspring of the supertype. Alright, okay, let's see the following example. Here we have two new types. Alright, two new types, that is employee and student. Here employee will have these following functions. Alright, the name, address, birth date, age, SSN, salary, hire date, seniority, and a student will have these following functions: name, address, birth date, age, SSN, major, and GPA. When you look at the functions of these two types, you can see that name, address, birth date, age, and SSN, these are inherited from the supertype person. See there, person has these functions: name, address, birth date, age, and SSN. And you can look at the subtypes now: name, address, birth date, age, and SSN. Both these two subtypes inherit these functions from the supertype person. Alright, let's move on. Since both student and employee includes all the functions defined for person plus some additional functions of their own, we can declare them to be subtypes of person. Each will inherit the previously defined functions of person, namely name, address, birth date, age, and SSN. For student, it is only necessary to define two new local functions such as the major and GPA, which are not inherited. Alright, and for employee, the salary and hire date functions, they are stored attributes, whereas seniority may be an operation which can be calculated from the value of hire date. This will be uploaded in Google Classroom, so you can study from this slide as well. Okay, let's move on. We can declare employee and student as follows, right? In general, a subtype includes all of the functions that are defined for its supertype plus some additional functions that are specific only to the subtype. Hence, it is possible to generate a type hierarchy to show the supertype and subtype relationship among all these types declared in the system. Or we can say, in other words, that a type hierarchy is influenced by the relationship among or between supertype and its subtypes. Alright. Let's see another example here. We have geometry object. Here, geometry object is defined as, we can define a geometry object as a supertype, and it has the following functions such as the shape, area, and reference point. Alright. For the geometry object type, shape is implemented as an attribute. Its domain can be enumerated type with values, triangle, rectangle, and circle, and so on. The area is the method applied to calculate the area. Reference point specifies the coordinate of a point to determine the object location. Alright. Suppose you want to define a number of subtypes for the geometry object type as follows: rectangle, triangle, and circle. Alright. The area operation may be implemented by a different method for each subtype. Alright, because the area of rectangles, triangles, and circles is not calculated in the same way. Alright, so it can be implemented by a different method for each subtype. The attribute reference point may have different meaning for each subtype. It may be the center point for rectangle and circle objects and a vertex point between two given sides of a triangle object. Please note, type definitions describe objects but does not generate objects on their own. Alright, type definition means it only describes objects. It cannot generate new objects. When an object is created, typically it belongs to one or more of these types that have been declared. Right, for example, the circle object is of type circle and geometry object by inheritance. Right? Each object also becomes a member of one or more persistent collections of objects or extents, which are used to group together as collections of objects that are persistently stored in the database. By persistent, we mean that I'll repeat. By persistent, we mean that the object will stay in the database or will exist in the database even if the program has been terminated. Alright, let us move on. Constraint on extent corresponding to a type hierarchy. Extent, it is defined to store a collection of persistent objects for each type or subtype. The constraint here is that every object in an extent that corresponds to a subtype must also be a member of the extent that corresponds to its supertype. Alright. Some object-oriented database systems have a predefined system type called the root class or the object class whose extent contains all the objects in the system. Please note down that extent, the meaning of extent is the collection of persistent objects. Please remember the things that I'm discussing now is basically for the simplified model. Whereas in the ODMG model, the user may or may not specify an extent for each class or type depending on the application. Alright? An extent is a named persistent object whose value is a persistent collection that holds a collection of objects of the same type that are stored permanently in the database. The object can be accessed and shared by multiple programs. It is also possible to create a transient collection, which these transient collection will exist temporarily during the execution of a program, but is not kept in a program when it has been terminated. Alright, so we can say that a transient collection is opposite to that of a persistent collection. Persistent collection will exist permanently in a program even when the program is terminated. However, a transient collection will only exist temporarily during the execution of a program but is not kept when the program is terminated. Alright. For example, a transient collection may be created in a program to hold the result of a query that selects some object from a persistent collection and copy those objects into a transient collection. The program can then manipulate the objects in the transient collection, and once the program terminates, the transient collection ceases to exist. That means it will no longer exist in the program or application. In general, numerous collections, transient or persistent, may contain objects of the same type. Alright, in the ODMG model, it distinguishes between type inheritance called the interface inheritance, which is denoted by a colon, and the extent inheritance constraint denoted by the keyword extent. Alright, that is all for now. We shall see about the ODMG model in the next class or the next video. Thank you.